Hi. Okay, so we're continuing our identity series, and today I want to talk about something quite similar to the last video. So in the last video, I talked about why people struggle to come to terms with who they really are. And one of the things I said was a lot of people don't even know who, they are. They don't, and then some people have a um, rigid opinion about themselves. So, people who say things like, this is who I am, take me or leave me, they don't give any room for the fact that there are possibilities. There are so many possibilities of who they can be and what they can do. They just, accept that, well, I'm a shy person and that's all I can be. I only know how to teach and that's all I can be. I only know finance and that's all I can be. They don't open themselves up to the fact that there are so many sides of them, okay? And so they just hold on to this rigid, idea of who they are. And then I also said something about we, there are so many parts of ourselves that we are ashamed of. And so the parts that we don't like, maybe something that happened to us in the past, or maybe even our background, we tend to hide it. We refuse to identify with it, forgetting that we are a total of everything that has happened to us. You might not be defined by it, but it definitely has contributed something to your life. And there's always a lesson to learn from whatever it is that you experienced. And so if you take that and you throw it away because it embarrasses you or because it hurts you, you won't come into the fullness of the person that you should be. Okay, so that's what I talked about in the last video. So today, I want to talk about why people are the way they are. So, for instance, if you're somebody that is timid, you know, and you're somebody who struggles with their self esteem, why are you that way? What happened to you that made you a timid person? That's what I want to talk about today. If you're somebody who, maybe people say you're arrogant or maybe you look down on people, I also want to explore why you could be that way. If you're somebody who is highly critical and judgmental of others, you're a perfectionist, you don't give room for mistakes for yourself and other people, you're bossy, you know, why are you the way you are? Do you see what I mean? So that's what the focus is going to be in today's video. And so I'm going to be looking at it from two angles, okay? So human beings are affected by two things, our genes and then the environment in which we grew up. So there are certain things, for instance, so like if I'm talking about, physical things, there are certain things that we inherited from our parents. Okay. I'm light skinned. My parents are light skinned. My dad is very light skinned. So I got that from my father. Okay. And for you, it could be, of course, your color, your height, your eye color, even things like the way we sound, certain mannerisms, a lot of those things we get from our parents. You know, there are other things, however, that we get from the way we're raised, our nurturing. And to a very large, so there's this argument about are we the way we are because of our genes or because of our nurturing? And personally, I feel that the way we are nurtured can impact us greatly. Do you understand? I feel, I'm not, what do you call, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know how, it's a topic, it's something that I'm interested in, but I'm not an expert in it. But I believe very strongly that you can literally wire yourself to become completely different or to a very large extent different from where you're coming from. And that's because you can create, pathways in your brain that just sets you in a completely different direction. Okay. So it's constantly, and that's what happens when you constantly repeat, certain actions. I'm sure you've heard this thing about it takes 21 days to change a habit. I don't know if that's true, but I just believe that the idea behind it is that constantly doing something shapes you. I'm a believer in that. And so I believe that there's nobody that cannot be transformed. If that conviction changes tomorrow, I'll come back and share it. But personally, I believe that there's nobody that cannot be transformed. And if there's such a person, then it's beyond the physical. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that we are impacted by two things, our genes and, you know, the way we're nurtured. Whether that nurturing is by our parents or, by our environment, it's very, very impactful. And so, what I'm going to be sharing in today's video is important, especially if you're a parent. But even if whether you're a parent or not, is important for you, because for you to even become an effective parent, you have to even understand why you are the way you are. That way, you can extend grace and empathy to your children. So if you have children that are particularly difficult and you understand that this child is impacted by the environment, rather than constantly getting angry, beating them, scolding them, you adopt a more problem solving approach. So you'll be thinking more of how do I solve this problem rather than how do I stop this child from embarrassing me. And if we're being honest, a lot of parents, especially we Africans, our approach is usually how do I stop this child's behavior from embarrassing me. So we're more concerned about how the child's behavior looks on us than how we can really get this child to change. And so sometimes it's like we're putting up a show for people so that they will say, oh, we are good parents, we don't spoil our children. And so something that you've been scolding this child since they were a baby. 5 years later, 6 years later, 8 years later, 10 years later, your scolding, your beating, your shaming has not worked. Is it not time to change? Is it not time to adopt something different? Do you see? Okay, that was a distraction. So let me come back to what I was saying. So I was saying that we're impacted by two things, our genes and the way we're nurtured. And, sometimes we can feel helpless as parents and think that, oh, there's nothing I can do for my child. But if you understand that routines can help your child, if you understand that what you're putting into that child has power, it will help you change the way you interact with your child. You'll begin to see your child as a person to nurture. You'll begin to understand how every word, how every action adds up to who that child becomes in future. And so understanding that our nurturing impacts us is, one of the best ways of, parenting our children. So what are the things that we experience that impact us, the way we're spoken to, the words said to us? All right. And I'm bringing it home to us so that we can also understand how our own actions impact our children. So growing up, how did your parents correct you? If they constantly scolded you, if they constantly shamed you, which was what a lot of our parents did, because that's what they knew, that's what was done to them, it's very likely that you grew up feeling a little insecure. And then for some people, the way they deal with it is to go on and make a lot of money and then use money to cover up all the insecurities. Use, oh, I'm successful to cover up all the insecurities, you know. And for some other people, is to act as if they're okay with their lack of accomplishments. Say it's not by what you have. Yes, we know, but being accomplished is also important, right? you know so they just act like, oh, it's not by what you have, all those things don't matter, all those things don't impact. Yeah, they don't, they're not the most important things, but if you can do much more, if God has ordained for you to do much more and to be much more, you're actually doing God a disservice. You're doing your world a disservice by being small. Do you see what I mean? So the reason you're small is because you've been conditioned to think that you're small and to think that, you know, um, you're not good enough. And all of that came from the things that you heard growing up. And it's very likely that you're doing the same to your children. It's very likely. It's very likely that you're critical, you're judgmental, because that's how, you were nurtured. And, for us Africans, it's also our culture. You know how we shame people. People will shame you for anything. You marry late, they shame you. You don't have a child, they shame you. You don't have money, they shame you. You have money, they shame you. You are sick, they shame you. Do you understand? So we live in our culture is one that shames people. So you find that people tend to want to hide, because as human beings, we're social beings. We like to be within a community. So anything that makes us feel ostracized, we want to avoid it. Okay. And so our nurturing is very important. Very important. And so we are the way, many of us are the way we are because of the way we've been nurtured by our parents, by our teachers, by, you know, society, and, all of that. And so the way to begin to come out of that is to begin to understand who God says that we are. And that's what I'm going to spend time doing in the last video. So I have one more video on the identity series, and I'm going to spend time doing that. Is to understand who God says that we are and how to access it, how to heal from the pain, and how to come into our true identity. It's only when we do that that we can then help our children be who they are ordained to be. If we don't come out of our own pain, if we don't come out of, the faulty conditioning, we're also going to try to raise our children to be like us, raise them in our reflection, raise them to be an extension of us, and also limit them and make it difficult for them to, you know, um, grow and be successful. And when I talk about success, I don't mean just money. In fact, if money is the only thing you have, you're actually, quite small. And for a lot of people, success equals money, and they're still not satisfied. And that's because they haven't come into what God ordained for them. I'm sure you've heard people say things like, oh, maybe you heard somebody do something wrong, that is morally wrong, maybe cheat on their husband, or have an abortion, or the runs girl, and you're like, God forbid, that can never be me. You don't know what that person's circumstances were growing up. You don't know if you were raped by your father, if you were abused by your mother's husband, constantly abused for years, if you grew up in a home where your father was a drunk and they were always coming to arrest him for owing money, if you grew up in a home where they were constantly beating themselves, you know, your mother constantly sent to the hospital by your father, and when people try to intervene, they fling you across the wall. If you grew up in that kind of home, if you grew up in a home where you probably had to steal to feed, who knows what you will end up doing? So the way we are nurtured is so, 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 so important. It affects us way more than we can imagine. And in today's world where, you know, our children are being nurtured by things that we have no control over, what they watch on TV. TV is raising children way more than parents are. The programs they watch on TV, the games they play, the things they visit on the internet, those are the things shaping our children. So I'm sharing this with you because you need to understand how um, important nurturing is. And to first of all, if you're a parent and you realize that there are gaps in your own life, that there are issues that you haven't resolved, how important it is for you to fix that, and then to also now seek the help that you need to work with your children and become a positive influence on them. Okay, I hope you found this useful. If you did, please share with people that you think might also find it beneficial, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.